130 fast attack boats, not in a port, not in a harbor, not in the concealed coves and coastal hideouts that the IRGC's maritime dispersal doctrine has used throughout this conflict to prevent satellite imagery from establishing the operational posture that force concentration produces, in the strait, in the water. In two massive coordinated formations, confirmed by fresh Sentinel-2 satellite imagery that dropped this morning of May 10th, 2026, showing the IRGC's Mosquito Fleet massed near Qeshm and the Rock Islands in the most public and deliberate display of naval presence that the Islamic Republic has produced since the conflict began 71 days ago. This is Iran's newest threat position. This is the visual statement the IRGC chose to make this morning. 130 boats visible from orbit, formed into coordinated formations that broadcast their presence to every intelligence collection system and every open-source satellite platform, and every analyst who checks the commercial imagery, feeds that Sentinel-2 makes available to anyone with the technical capacity to query them. The IRGC released the coordinates of its own threat position, and CENTCOM simultaneously released the imagery of what those coordinates will meet. F-16 Vipers actively flying sorties in and around the Strait of Hormuz in support of American operations. F-A-18 Super Hornets on combat air patrol off the carrier decks of the Abraham Lincoln and the George H.W. Bush and the Gerald R. Ford, the three-carrier force architecture that represents the largest concentration of American naval aviation in the Persian Gulf's operational history. AH-64 Apache attack helicopters operating in the area. The same Apaches that CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper personally flew over the strait on May 3rd before Project Freedom launched. The same Apaches that sent the first wave of IRGC fast attack boats to the bottom of the ocean during the initial Project Freedom engagement, demonstrating with the specific operational clarity of things sinking rather than floating that the Mosquito Fleet doctrine was not going to produce the outcome that the IRGC's planning models predicted. Trump released an image this morning showing the strait with Iranian fast attack craft approaching. The image is deliberate. The timing is deliberate. The specific visual of what those 130 boats would see coming at them from the American side is the deliberate strategic communication complement to the Sentinel-2 imagery of the boats themselves. Iran shows its fleet. The United States shows what answers the fleet. Two simultaneous image releases. One from Iran, demonstrating what it has. One from CENTCOM, demonstrating what responds to what Iran has. The visual conversation between these two releases, happening simultaneously on the morning of May 10th, is the specific diplomatic and military communication of a conflict that has not ended and whose participants are telling each other in imagery rather than through Pakistani or Qatari intermediaries exactly what the next phase of engagement looks like from their respective positions. Understand the specific significance of the 130 boat formation before drawing conclusions about what it means for the conflict's next phase. The IRGC has not suddenly produced 130 fast attack boats from nowhere. These are the survivors of the Mosquito Fleet that was deployed throughout the conflict and that has sustained losses through every engagement with American Apaches and surface combatants and naval aircraft. The fact that 130 boats remain and are now being massed into visible coordinated formations near Qeshm and the Rock Islands is simultaneously a demonstration of residual capability and the specific confession of what has been lost. The Iranian military had over 160 naval vessels before the conflict began. The operational record of 71 days of American strike operations, naval engagement, and blockade enforcement has decimated that conventional naval force. The IRGC Navy's surface combatants, its frigates, its corvettes, the conventional naval architecture that would contest American destroyer operations in the deep water of the Arabian Sea, is gone or degraded beyond operational significance. The Mosquito Fleet is what remains. The 130 fast attack boats are the surviving asymmetric capability of an institution whose conventional naval power has been systematically eliminated. This is not a knock on the boats. They represent a real threat that dismissing would be a strategic error. The fast attack boats of the IRGC's Mosquito Fleet run 60 to 75 feet in length, diesel-powered, capable of 50 to 60 knots, which means they are faster than any American destroyer operating in the confined water environment of the Strait of Hormuz, armed with 107mm rockets, 12, 7mm heavy machine guns, and 23mm autocannons. Some variants carry the C-802 anti-ship missile, a weapon with Chinese origins that skims the sea surface at subsonic speed with a range of approximately 100 miles and a 160-kilogram warhead. The C-802 is a genuine ship killer. The same coastal-based sites that were launching C-802s against American vessels have been struck in the operations of the past several days. But the boat-launched variant remains in the inventory of the boats that the Sentinel-2 imagery is showing in formation this morning. The swarm tactic is the doctrine. Not a single concentrated attack from one direction that the Aegis system's threat prioritization can manage, with the sequential intercept logic that makes a linear attack manageable. Multiple formations, splitting into simultaneous approach vectors, arriving at an American warship from different compass points at the same time, forcing the defensive system to engage threats whose approach geometry creates the specific interference condition, where engaging one threat creates the window for another threat to close distance from a different vector. The IRGC knows its boats cannot match American destroyers in a conventional naval engagement. The Mosquito Fleet doctrine is not designed to defeat the destroyers in a conventional engagement. It is designed to overwhelm the point defense systems through volume and vector diversity that creates saturation conditions even against a superior defensive architecture. The doctrine's effectiveness against the specific defensive systems deployed in this theater is the specific question that the 130 boat formation is trying to communicate a credible answer to. Here's where the morning's strategic picture requires the specific technical analysis that allows the credible threat assessment to be separated from the propaganda posturing. The American defensive answer to 130 fast attack boats approaching simultaneously from multiple vectors begins before the boats reach engagement range. It begins with a detection architecture. The E-2D Advanced Hawkeye is the airborne early warning and battle management platform whose radar provides the integrated air and surface picture that coordinates the entire American response. Its radar tracks the boats from the moment they begin moving toward American assets, providing the continuous track data that the kill chain requires to assign the specific fighter and helicopter assets to specific sectors of the engagement area before the boats close to weapons range. The E-2D is not visible from the surface. It is above the operational horizon, watching everything in the strait simultaneously and pumping that information to every platform in the network through the Link 16 data architecture that makes the entire force package operate as a networked system rather than a collection of independent assets. The F-35s bring the APG-81 active electronically scanned array radar, the specific sensor that can simultaneously track multiple surface targets while providing the targeting data that other platforms in the network need without broadcasting the aircraft's own position in a detectable way. The F-35 can see the boats that cannot see the F-35. It can share what it sees with the F-15E Strike Eagles and the F-16s and the AH-64 Apaches through the same Link 16 architecture. The targeting picture that each platform in the response network has access to is the composite of everything every sensor in the network can see. The RQ-4. Global Hawk adds the persistent ISR layer that complements the fighter-borne sensors with the endurance that manned platforms cannot match. A Global Hawk can maintain orbit over the Strait of Hormuz for the duration of an engagement that lasts hours, providing the continuous surveillance track that the kill chain requires when the fast attack boats are using the islands and coastal terrain to break line of sight with surface-based sensors. The tactical response when the engagement begins is the sector assignment methodology. The strait is divided into geographic sectors. Each sector is assigned to specific platforms whose weapons load and range profile make them optimal for the threat density in that sector. A boat that crosses from one sector into another gets engaged by the platform that owns the new sector, not the one that was tracking it in the previous sector. The specific assignment prevents the wasteful overlap of multiple platforms engaging the same target while leaving other targets unengaged. The A-10 Thunderbolt II is the platform that every fast attack boat operator should be thinking about when those prayer beads come out this morning. The A-10's GAU-8 Avenger is a 30mm 7-barrel Gatling cannon that fires depleted uranium penetrator rounds at 3,900 rounds per minute. A fiberglass fast attack boat hull hit by a burst from the GAU-8 does not continue attacking. The A-10's operational profile over confined water, slow, low, and with the specific loiter capability that the probe and drogue aerial refueling system from C-130 Hercules tankers enables, makes it the specific platform for the sustained engagement of boat swarms that requires consistent fire, rather than the single-pass ordnance delivery that higher performance jets provide. The A-10 can stay in the fight for the duration of a sustained engagement. It is designed to absorb battle damage and continue operating. It is the platform whose characteristics are specifically matched to the threat profile that 130 boats represent. The AH-64 Apache pairs with the A-10 as the maritime boat engagement team whose combined effectiveness against the IRGC Mosquito Fleet has already been demonstrated in the May 3rd engagement. The Apache's Hellfire missiles engage boats at ranges where the boat's own weapons cannot reach the helicopter. Its helmet-mounted targeting system allows the pilot to engage targets in the direction the pilot is looking, which makes the angular acquisition of fast-moving targets in the confined strait environment faster than the fixed-forward weapons that fighter jets employ. The Apache and the A-10 are the combination whose effectiveness against the IRGC fast attack boats the operational record has already documented 5-inch guns on the Arleigh Burke-class destroyers bring the surface naval component to the engagement. The 127mm Mk-45 naval gun system, with its 16-mile range and rapid-fire capability, addresses the specific problem of boats that close to within gun engagement range of the surface combatants, providing the sustained rate of fire against maneuvering surface targets that missile systems are not optimized for. But the most strategically significant American response to the 130 boat formation visible in the Sentinel-2 imagery is the option that precedes the boats entering the water: strike the coastal hideouts before they launch. The GBU-72 5,000-pound bunker-busting penetrator has been used in this conflict against hardened coastal anti-ship missile sites along the Iranian coastline. The same weapon system applied to the coastal infrastructure that coordinates and stages the fast attack boat swarms before they launch addresses the problem at its source rather than in the water, where the swarm saturation logic is most operationally challenging. A boat that is destroyed in its cove before its crew has received the launch order is not participating in the swarm. A command node that is destroyed before it can coordinate the simultaneous multiple vector approach is not organizing the saturation attack. This is the specific strategic option that the 4D chess analysis of the morning's imagery makes most visible. The IRGC has publicly released the coordinates of its 130 boat formation. Those coordinates are now known to every ISR platform in the American operational picture. The specific locations near Qeshm and the Rock Islands, where those formations are assembled, are documented in the public record by the Sentinel-2 imagery. The option to strike those locations before the boats disperse into the operational geometry of a swarm attack is on the table in the specific form of a strike planning calculation that the F-16 Wild Weasels and the F-35s and the B-1B Lancers that have been operating in this theater throughout the conflict can execute. The IRGC released its own targeting data. CENTCOM is looking at the same Sentinel-2 imagery and processing the specific options that the data creates. The name that appears in the intelligence picture this morning, alongside the 130 boat formation, is the one that the Western media has not yet placed prominently in its coverage of the conflict's current phase: Brigadier General Mustafa Salami, the older brother of Hussein Salami, the IRGC commander-in-chief, who was killed in Israeli strikes in June 2025. Hussein Salami was everywhere: the speeches, the threats, the propaganda, the inflammatory statements that the IRGC's information operations required someone of his institutional prominence to deliver with the specific authority that the commander-in-chief's position provided. Mustafa is the opposite of his brother in operational profile, almost invisible. Extremely rare media appearances, no high-visibility propaganda role, regular Iranian army, not IRGC. A veteran of the Iran-Iraq War from the 1980s, currently serving as a senior advisor to the Chief of General Staff of Operations, with a key advisory role inside the central headquarters that coordinates and bridges Iran's regular armed forces with IRGC joint military operations. The man who moves between the institutional boundary that separates the regular Iranian army from the IRGC at the specific moment when the IRGC's internal power struggle and its failed engagement doctrines are producing the institutional fractures that the New York Post documented as the civil war between the hardliners and the civilian government, is a figure worth understanding precisely because his low profile is the profile of someone doing actual operational planning rather than institutional communication. The 130 boat formations were released publicly this morning. Someone inside the Iranian military apparatus authorized that release. The specific decision to release the formation imagery publicly, rather than maintaining the operational security that concealment of the fleet's position would provide, is a decision that reflects an institutional calculation about what the release is supposed to accomplish. The release is a deterrence communication. It says, we have this. We are willing to use this. If you relaunch Project Freedom, if Project Freedom Plus includes the specific elements that the unspecified plus implies, this is what responds to it. It is not an operational preparation for an imminent attack. An institution preparing an imminent attack does not broadcast its force disposition in satellite imagery available to the public. It is a bargaining chip being displayed at the negotiating table through the specific visual communication of military posture rather than through the diplomatic language of the Pakistani and Qatari backchannels. The fact that Mustafa Salami operates in the space between the regular army and the IRGC at this specific moment, when the institutional boundary between those two organizations is the primary fault line of the Iranian power struggle that has produced the memorandum's non-response, is the intelligence indicator that the most careful analysis of the morning's operational picture should be attending to most carefully. The IRGC's hardliners control the institution and its resources. The regular army's institutional culture is different. The Iran-Iraq War veterans who form the senior leadership of the regular army are the generation whose specific institutional memory includes the moment in 1988 when Khomeini called the ceasefire acceptance drinking poison and accepted it anyway because the operational reality made continuation impossible. They know what that moment feels like from the inside of the institution that was fighting the war it had to stop. Mustafa Salami, with his Iran-Iraq war background and his bridging role between the regular army and the IRGC command structure, is the specific figure who understands both the operational reality that the 130 boats represent and the institutional memory of what happens to an Iranian military that continues fighting past the point where the operational reality makes continuation impossible. Whether this makes him a figure who could influence the IRGC's response to the memorandum through the specific advisory access his position provides is the intelligence question that the analyst community is processing this morning alongside the boat formation imagery. Project Freedom Plus is the American operational answer to the strategic conversation the imagery is conducting. Trump confirmed it publicly. We may go back to Project Freedom if things don't happen. It will be Project Freedom Plus, meaning Project Freedom plus other things. The deliberate ambiguity of plus other things is the American counter to the IRGC's deterrence display. 130 boats in formation is a known quantity whose threat the American defensive architecture has planned against, has already partially engaged in the May 3rd action, and has the specific platforms and weapons to address in detail. Plus other things is an unknown quantity whose content the IRGC must model without the specific information required to model it accurately. Project Freedom was the convoy escort operation that launched May 4th and was paused 48 hours later at Pakistan's request while peace talks continued. Its operational scope was the escort of neutral commercial shipping through the strait, a humanitarian mission framed specifically to make Iranian attacks on it diplomatically catastrophic. The plus that Trump attached to the resumed version is the expansion beyond humanitarian escort to whatever additional operational elements the plus encompasses, including the strike options, the covert operations, the intelligence actions, and the direct action capabilities that the American force posture and theater currently includes. The IRGC cannot model plus without knowing its content. The 130 boats in formation are the IRGC's attempt to make plus feel deterred through the specific display of asymmetric capability that the satellite imagery communicates. The F-16s and F-A-18s and Apaches in the CENTCOM response imagery are the American answer that plus is not deterred. The internet blackout is the information management dimension of the boat formation's meaning inside Iran. CNN's reporting on Iran's two-tier internet access system is the specific outside documentation of what the regime is doing to its own population's ability to understand the operational context within which the 130 boat formation exists. The internet blackout is now more than 2 months old, the longest on record for any modern nation-state. Millions of Iranians who rely on internet access for their professional work, their communication with family members, their economic participation in the online economy that Iran had been developing before February 28th, have been cut off for 71 consecutive days. The IRGC is actively hunting Starlink users. The specific technology that allows circumvention of the internet blackout by connecting to satellite-based internet, rather than the domestic infrastructure the regime controls, is being targeted by IRGC intelligence operations. The detection method, identifying the signal that a Starlink terminal emits when activated and dispatching teams to the location, means that every Iranian citizen who attempts to use the technology that could connect them to the outside information environment is making a personal security decision about whether accessing accurate information about the conflict is worth the risk of being visited by the people who killed Ham Aladdin for the same reason. The two-tier system that the CNN reporting documents, the Internet Pro program that provides privileged access to trusted regime elites while the general population is imprisoned in communication darkness, is the specific institutional document of who the Islamic Republic believes deserves information access, the senior IRGC officers whose operational planning requires connectivity. The regime's administrative class whose institutional functions cannot be performed without internet. The political elite whose international communications require the access that the blackout denies to ordinary Iranians. The anger this two-tier access is producing in the Iranian public is not visible in the public information environment that the regime controls. It is visible in the CNN reporting that breaches the blackout from the outside and in the specific word that the CNN report uses to describe the public sentiment generated by the discovery that the people conducting the blackout are exempt from it. Widespread public criticism. The institution that is imprisoning its population in information darkness is simultaneously exempt from the darkness it is imposing. The population that is discovering this is making the specific political calculation that the discovery produces in any population that observes its governing institution applying to itself different rules than it applies to the governed. The state media is boasting about the unity of the government and the people in the face of what it calls an imposed war by the United States and Israel, produced in the context of a two-tier internet system that gives the government connectivity and denies it to the people, is the specific propaganda contradiction that the internet blackout itself creates. The unity is proclaimed by the institution that has decided the people do not deserve the same information access as the government. The people can observe this decision's existence. They cannot observe its content. But they can observe that it exists and draw the specific conclusions that its existence warrants about the nature of the unity being proclaimed. The 130 boats in the strait are the visual statement of an institution that is simultaneously managing this internal contradiction, the external military pressure of the American force posture that has responded to every Iranian attack with 0 American losses, and the specific intelligence penetration that the Zanjan explosion documented as reaching into the VIP protection unit, whose function is to protect the leadership from exactly the kind of insider threat that the Zanjan coordinates represent. 15,000 American service members enforcing the blockade, up to 50,000 in the CENTCOM region altogether. Marines from the Marine Expeditionary Unit with their F-35B short takeoff and vertical landing aircraft. The 82nd Airborne Overhead coordinating the ISR collection that feeds the kill chain. The 3 carrier strike groups whose combined air wing capacity represents over 100 land and sea-based fighter aircraft, available for the specific mission of addressing the 130 boat swarm that the Sentinel-2 imagery has documented in coordinated formation near Qeshm this morning. The Sun Tzu formulation that 100 battles and 100 victories come from knowing your enemy and knowing yourself is the operational philosophy that the morning's imagery exchange is conducting in real time. Iran released the imagery to say, "Know us, see our boats, calculate the cost of what you are about to do." CENTCOM released its response imagery to say, "We know you, we have known you. We knew where the boats were before you showed us, and we know what answers them." The DARPA XRQ-73 Shepherd drone that Northrop Grumman announced on May 6th and whose first flight occurred in April 2026 at Edwards Air Force Base is the specific technological development that makes the next phase of the ISR architecture visible in the forward edge of what the American military can bring to the surveillance problem. Hybrid electric propulsion, flying wing design, 1,200 pounds, dramatically reduced acoustic signature, meaning harder to hear than any conventional drone. The specific combination of low acoustic signature, flying wing radar cross-section reduction, and hybrid electric propulsion that allows the platform to loiter without the thermal and acoustic signatures that conventional drone propulsion produces is the next generation of surveillance capability that will make the IRGC's attempt to conceal coastal military infrastructure significantly more difficult than it has been throughout this conflict. The 130 boats that assembled under cover of darkness and broke into formation as the sun rose are the visual statement of what Iran has left. The F-16s and the FA-18s and the Apaches and the A-10s and the E-2D Hawkeyes and the Global Hawks and the Link 16 network targeting architecture that makes them all talk to each other are the visual statement of what answers it. The CIA dimension is the specific element that the imagery does not capture, but that the operational picture of May 10th includes as fully as the visible military assets do. The specific covert capability to disrupt Iran's internal military communications, to accelerate the economic destabilization that the blockade is producing, to target the IRGC's financial networks that fund its operational budget, and to conduct the intelligence operations inside the Iranian military that the Zanjan explosion and the Immortal Guard's documented capability demonstrate are possible at the depth of penetration that produces VIP protection unit casualties from insider-provided coordinates. The boats are in the water. The platforms are in the air. The networks are linked through Link 16 and the E-2D Hawkeye's data architecture. The GBU-72 5,000-pound penetrators are in the weapons bays of the aircraft that already know where the coastal hideouts are because the Sentinel-2 imagery just confirmed the specific locations near Qeshm and the Rock Islands, where 130 boats have chosen to make their morning statement. Project Freedom Plus is the answer to the statement. The boats showed Iran's last card on the water. The response imagery showed what trumps it. And somewhere in the operational planning discussions that are happening right now between the aircraft carriers and the Saudi bases and the Special Operations Command element aboard the Ocean Trader at Diego Garcia and the CENTCOM Commander's Operations Center that Admiral Brad Cooper personally flew Apaches over on May 3rd before sending 6 of those boats to the bottom. The specific content of Plus is being finalized against the specific threat picture that 130 boats in coordinated formation near Qeshm has just provided. The IRGC released its own targeting data this morning. CENTCOM said, "Thank you for the imagery. The F-16 Vipers are in the air. The Apaches are in the air. The FA-18s are on combat air patrol off the carrier decks. The 130 boats are in the water. And the prayer beads are out in every fast attack boat cockpit in those 2 massive coordinated formations near Qeshm and the Rock Islands. Because the platforms that answer them are already airborne, and Plus has not been defined yet, which means the boats in the water do not know what they are about to meet. But the imagery that CENTCOM released this morning gives them the specific preview that the American side wanted them to have before they decide whether the deterrence display is worth converting into the actual engagement that would test what Plus contains against what 130 boats can do in the Strait of Hormuz on May 10th, 2026. The boats know what the Apaches did to 6 of their colleagues on May 3rd. There are now 130 of them. There are now 3 carrier strike groups. The math of that specific comparison is being calculated by everyone with a prayer bead in their hand in those formations near Qeshm this morning.